Resident Evil has given us a lot of excellent, memorable characters over the years, but when you've been around for as long as this series has been, there's bound to be a few stumbles. In Resident Evil's case, the stumbles have often gone hand in hand with embarrassingly bad characters. Though we're hopefully looking ahead to a future where such instances are minimized, here, we're going to take a look back at some of the worst characters in RE history and rank them from bad to worse. Before we go ahead, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos every single day, and your support really helps us out. With that out of the way, let's start. Number 11. James Marcus. Honestly, James Marcus' backstory is actually really interesting. His close ties with Umbrella, his work on some of their most pivotal experiments, the way he was betrayed by the company, and more would have made for fascinating storytelling if it had been handled right. It wasn't handled right, though. James Marcus was a caricature. Rather than being a morally dubious and tragic figure, he was instead portrayed as a hilariously dramatic guy dressed in a robe who stands on mountaintops and raises his hands while opera music blares on in the background. Resident Evil can be strange sometimes, but this was a bit much. Number 10. Ramon Salazar. There was a lot of weird stuff going on in Resident Evil 4, and honestly, we were down for most of it. But seriously, what in the world was up with this weird man-child? Strange character design, terribly written dialogue, awful voice acting that could make your ears bleed, and just all around an overabundance of misplaced goofiness. Ramon Salazar felt like a character that had been plucked straight out of a game that could not have been more different from Resident Evil. When the RE4 remake eventually arrives, we seriously hope he gets a major overhaul in every way imaginable. Number 9. Alfred Ashford. Code Veronica was where Resident Evil started going all in on its goofy, campy tone, and very few characters in the game personify this as well as Alfred Ashford. Except maybe he takes things a bit too far. His weird split personality does nothing to help simplify the plot that's already needlessly complicated. His relationship with his sister is just downright weird, and like so many other bad Resident Evil characters, he's dragged down by terrible, annoying voice acting. Definitely one of the worst villains we've ever seen in this franchise. Number 8. Jessica SHERAWAT. Resident Evil Revelations had no shortage of bad characters, and we'll be talking about a couple more in just a bit. But Jessica SHERAWAT is not only one of the worst characters in the game, but probably in the entire series. She served no purpose other than being eye candy, which meant she was barely even a character. And what little personality she had was so exaggerated, so hilariously one-note, it became impossible to ever root for her in any meaningful way. Chris Redfield definitely deserved a better partner. Number 7. Ricardo Irving. If you haven't played through Resident Evil 5 multiple times, chances are you might not even remember who Ricardo Irving is. And we wouldn't blame you for that, honestly. It's not that he was bad, he was just so plain and generic. The real star of the show in RE5 was, of course, Albert Wesker, and Irving was never much more than a lackey and a roadblock. But couldn't Capcom have gone with a roadblock who could rise up above all the action villain cliches in the action villain cliche playbook? Number 6. Quint and Keith. We have nothing against characters who exist only for comedic relief. Well, we have nothing against them under the right circumstances. But when they are A. shoehorned into a horror game where the comic relief should be kept at a minimum, and B. so painfully foolish and unfunny that they end up failing miserably at the one thing they're supposed to do, you can't help but hate them. Quint and Keith in Resident Evil Revelations would have been tolerable, maybe even mildly enjoyable if they were used in moderation, but the fact that they kept popping up only serves to make them that much more annoying. Number 5. Jake Muller. Talk about disappointing sons of legendary fathers. The illegitimate child of Albert Wesker taking on the role of a playable protagonist should have been a home run for Resident Evil, but Jake Muller was anything but. His gruff, tortured aesthetic fell completely flat. His edgy attitude did little more than make him an unbearable presence, and the fact that he was involved in some of RE6's most hilariously over-the-top Michael Bay action sequences only made series fans dislike him even more. Number 4. Derek Simmons. Albert Wesker is easily one of the greatest video game antagonists of all time, and following his death in RE5, any new antagonist was going to have trouble stepping out of his shadow. But no one could have imagined a villain as bad as Derek Simmons even in their worst nightmares. On top of being heavily characterized and much like RE6, needlessly and painfully over the top, one of Simmons' biggest motivations was his weird obsession with Ada Wong. Also, at one point, he turned into a T-Rex. What the hell was that about? Number 6. Ashley Graham. People often say that Ashley gets more hate than she deserves, but it's hard to agree with that. She's not even a character. At best, she's a plot device, and at worst, she's an annoying gameplay mechanic. Constantly having to watch out for her and having to rescue her from enemies while she's incessantly calling out to Leon for help gets very old very fast. But all of that would have been somewhat easy to overlook if she was at least an interesting character. But she's not, though. RE4 hardly gives her anything resembling a solid personality, and what you're left with instead is an annoying little girl whose only reason for existing is to annoy the player. Number 2. Billy Coen. Resident Evil 0 struggled hard with its antagonist, James Marcus, so it makes sense that it would balance that with a terrible protagonist as well. Rebecca Chambers may have been a delight, but her partner Billy Coen was anything but. Needlessly edgy, terribly voiced, burdened with a boring backstory and motivations, and given little to no resolution, Billy had very little going for him. It's not surprising that he hasn't shown up in RE ever again, because really, it's hard to see what his place is in this universe.
Well, no offense, honey, but your kind doesn't seem to want me around, so I'm afraid our little chat time is over.
Wait! You're under arrest.
No thanks, Dollface. I've already worn handcuffs.
I could shoot, you know.
Number 1. Steve Burnside.
Who brought you here and where is your family?
Shut up! I don't want to talk about it!
Steve.
Never mind. Let's get going.
Oh, Steve. At least you're number 1 in some way. Surely the most obvious pick for the top spot in a list such as this. Steve Burnside is easily the most annoying character in Resident Evil, and perhaps even one of the worst characters in any video game ever. From an annoying personality to terrible voice acting, from a relationship with Claire Redfield that is never properly sold, to multiple instances of unbelievable stupidity throughout the story. Steve goes out of his way throughout the game to make the player hate him. If Code Veronica ever gets remade, Steve would probably need a complete and total overhaul. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.